I am here with Mette, and this is a pre-recorded talk because Mette can't be with us on conference day, but we can now talk about a lot of the things, and then some of the things will be answered in Q&A after with a different person. So Mette, introduce yourself, and then I would love to hear about the project.
Thanks, and thanks for inviting me. It's a pity I can't be there live on the 27th of April. I'm traveling, so thanks for providing this opportunity instead. My name is Mette. I am a Sociocracy fan. I'm 4 years old in Sociocracy, I would say. I am currently working as the head of development in a mid-sized Danish municipality called Slagelse, which is where we're working to transition to Sociocracy. So I will tell more about that later. I have worked with the internal life or the organizational and leadership and employee aspect of organizations for nearly 30 years now. I have worked 28 years in traditional organizations. I guess I have soon worked 30 years in traditional organizations, but for the past 4 years tried to implement non-hierarchical leadership and organizational structures. But just to say that I have felt, witnessed, been a leader in driving change in implementing strategies in very traditional organizations. So my passion comes from integrating sociocracy at the workplace.
Right. And now, but then you ended up in the municipality, and I don't quite know how that happened. Both how did they have the idea and how did they find you? How did all of that happen?
So about 4.5 years ago, the mayor, or maybe I should start by saying that the municipality of Slagelse, which it is called, is there are 80,000 inhabitants and nearly 7,500 employees, so it's quite a big workplace. And for those of you who do not know Danish welfare system very well, what we do is we provide all sorts of public welfare. So it's everything from kindergarten, schools, elderly homes. It's also everything that has to do with infrastructure, roads. It's developing the business, it's culture, it's voluntary organizations, supporting them. It's like everything that has to do with the public life, basically, in the municipality. So 4.5 years ago, the mayor of that place, I think he read the book written by Frédéric Laloux and realized that, I mean, he could just recognize so many of the dysfunctions described around the traditional organizations. And he was very inspired by the concept of the chill organization. So he basically got the mandate from the city council to start trying to transition the entire municipality in that direction. He then hired a new head of administration, you can call it, so basically the top leader of the 7,500 employees, because he had the kind of like the same passion of basically trying to fight bureaucracy and reinstall meaning at the workplace. So the two of them started out, and after a couple of years, they realized they knew where, kind of sort of where they wanted to go, but they didn't know how. And so they decided, and at the same time, the position I'm holding now looked a little different, but it was it became vacant. So they decided to basically twist it a little bit and then start looking for someone who could take care of all the stuff that should be taken care of in this position, while at the same time showing up with some suggestions for how to get this done. And this happened like I think 3 years after I attended summer school in Denmark around sociocracy and had progressed in my training there. I worked as an independent consultant, working with these methods in teams and departments, and was super happy about that. I've been working in the private sector for 28 years and was very reluctant to apply for a job in the public sector. So I met with the head of administration, and we drank a lot of coffee and talked about my approach to it. And that seemed to resonate, and I got the job. So that's a year and a half ago.
I have so many questions already. First of all, how did the mayor, I want to ask, where did that courage come from? Because I'm not aware of any project like that. So what kind of person is it that just says, oh, that sounds great, I want to do it? And then the other one is, I guess, what were your biggest concerns around it? Maybe those, yeah.
So I think, first of all, I don't know, I can't speak on his behalf, but I'm not sure he bought into everything around the concept. But he definitely intuitively knew and felt that there was something in this concept of the non-hierarchical organization that was appealing to him. At the same time, I guess it's true in most parts of the world, but it definitely is in Denmark, and it definitely is in this municipality, that the gap between the need for the services that we provide and the resources that we have available is just increasing. And they have been kind of like turning the optimization button for I don't know how many years. And I think he just really wanted to try something else, because there's like an end to, you can't continue to just increase optimization and productivity all the time. So I think he bought into the idea and the concept, but he didn't know anything about Sociocracy, so he wasn't that detailed about it. And the city council, I think, was in the same place. So that's why I do agree that he had some courage, but I'm sure that he would agree with me that maybe he didn't know entirely what it would look like. And to be quite frank, I'm not sure what it will look like either in detail once we get further down the road. And your second question was my hesitations? Just all the reputation that the public sector has in terms of bureaucracy and yeah, everything is just perceived to be moving very slow. And then I didn't have any history with that geographical area, so I wasn't emotionally attached to the people living there. So yeah, I guess that was some of my concerns.
So then let's go chronologically. So then what happened next? You drank a lot of coffee, and then you got the job, and then what?
Then Corona happened. But apart from that, because it is such a big organization, 7,500 employees, my first question was, how do we embrace this? I mean, how do we orchestrate a transition where 7,500 employees eventually will have to go through the unlearning of what we have been taught in the traditional organization, and the learning of all the new methodologies and collaboration ways. So my first thought was that we can't. It would be counterintuitive for me to start this journey in a hierarchical way. So, you know, the traditional change that I have been part of driving in the past, you sit at the top of the organization, you decide on a strategy, and you then establish like an implementation squad, and then you start from the top and basically, you know, train the top managers and then the middle managers and blah, blah, blah. I thought it would be kind of like weird to do that when you're working with a non-hierarchical methodology. So because of that, and because of the fact that this is super hard, it's a huge challenge, and I didn't know the people working in the organization. So I decided that instead it should be based on people signing up for this voluntarily. So we basically said, I would be very happy to talk about this and to tell about Sociocracy and how we're going to embrace this challenge. And if you find that this sounds interesting, we will help you. And that is still the approach. So it's
sorry, that's talking to like departments, that's talking to individuals, talking to leaders, like who's getting that message?
anyone that was in proximity of me. So of course it started with my peers in the senior management team or in the top management team. One of them invited me to come talk to the managers in her area, and some of them, that was the area where they provide for elderly care, and some of the middle managers there thought it sounded interesting, and then we would basically start. And then, you know, it's just been word of mouth, and then we've been informing about it and via our intranet, which is not a very efficient channel of information. But basically, I've just been spreading the word, and I have never said no to an invitation to come and talk about this, regardless of whether it's 2 people or it's 150 or even more. So, and the result of that is that we now have a demand in the organization for training and for getting started that we basically can't meet. And that sounds like a luxury problem, but of course that's where we are right now. We need to figure out how do we close the gap between we established a circle that we call the Facilitator Circle, and our purpose is to drive the integration of Sociocracy in the municipality. And I couldn't hire new people in, so it was basically just finding people again who had the facilitator skills already from a different context, and then training them and getting them more and more capable in terms of co-facilitating the transition. So it's me and 4 more people in that circle, which is not a lot for 7,500 people. Yeah, so that was the first kind of like thing we decided is this has to be on a voluntary basis, because it's so hard to get this done. So if people are forced to do it, we have to work with both the unlearning and the learning of new skills and the resistance, and that would simply be too much. I don't know how long we could do it like this, but for now there's plenty to do.
Is there a little bit of a pattern of like this area is really going for it? You mentioned elderly care is going for it, and then other departments, I mean, you don't have to name who they are, but I'm just curious, is it a little bit all over the board, or are they what's the word? I guess, you know, like areas that are really not wanting to hear about anything?
And there's one area where there seems to be no interest at all, and then the rest is basically scattered. It's also maybe important to mention that before I joined, they had a couple of years where they had introduced a term or a way of thinking, which is called, I don't know how to translate that into English, but it's basically the notion of if you see something that you don't believe is the way it should be, do something. So basically, and that sounds so banal, but if you work in a system where you have to ask for permission and you have been raised that way in that system always, then it's not that simple to just do something. And they have been promoting this idea of, you know, learn through action and do something rather than talk about it or analyze it or ask for permission. You know, try something different if you see that something needs to be attended. And they had come a certain way with that, but I think there was I think people were hungry for something more specific in terms of how do we actually make the transition towards the non-hierarchical organization. We can't figure it out by ourselves. And so we offered them something very specific. So I think the demand was there already when we came. So the first thing we did was this, like, it has to be voluntary. And then having worked with organizational transition for so many years, I know that one of the huge obstacles that appear quite early in those transitions is the feeling of being incompetent. So like if you have to transition from something to something else, you have to unlearn what you already know and learn something new. And that period of time where you have to unlearn what you're really good at and learn something new and you don't really master it yet, that period can be somewhat frustrating. So we knew that we had to offer a lot of training opportunities. So what we're doing now is we're offering online training, which basically came out of Corona, but has seemed to kind of like work well in terms of introduction. So everybody can sign up free of charge, of course, for this online training, which is all about getting to understand the methodology and some of the key concepts, like what is a circle, what is decision by consent, I mean, how do the meetings actually work? I mean, some very, very specific things. What is a facilitator? What is a lead? What is an organizational role? You know, all of those kind of basic concepts that are so beautifully described in this little book. and then if people find it still to be interesting and they really want to start working with this, then we have tailor-made a 4 full day training program where people are invited in and we pretend they work in an organization that is run fully by means of Sociocracy. And then we train and train and train and train and train. So it's basically like facilitator training light. They don't get all the badges. And then after that, we allocate a co-facilitator from our circle if they want to start out by establishing a general circle and, you know, start working with the structure and everything, then they get help from us. And some of them don't want to do like the full Monty. They would just rather, you know, start small and try it out. And some of them even don't want to go back and say the word Sociocracy. They just want to start out with, you know, see what happens if we try to apply some of the methodologies, and then they come back and say, now we're ready to do more. So yes, it's all over the place. We have, last time I counted, 20 or 21 kind of like units that are now working with the methodologies. And a unit is everything from, like, I think the biggest unit is an elderly home with 220 employees. And the smallest one is at a small unit in the finance department.
I want to go back just one little bit because that's one thing that I'm really curious about to hear take on. And that is the difference between kind of jumping in with both feet and adopting a lot at once, which has its advantages and disadvantages. And then there's the incremental step. What do you, I mean, what's your take on that? What do you recommend to people? What do you see in the different approaches and so on? Just can you tell me more about that?
Yeah, super good question. And it's a very good, the timing is really good because actually last Friday, so just a couple of days ago, I spoke to the manager of one of the units that are now working with this, and they have come to realize that they have been moving ahead too fast. So we must have done the introduction right, because there are like 75 employees in that unit, and they all got so enthused by the concept and the whole idea. So they all wanted to attend training at once. They all wanted to establish circles. And now they're at a point where they need to ask people to hold back. And that's actually a bit frustrating. So we always say to people, take it slow, take it easy. I mean, don't push it, because you kind of like, you have this honeymoon phase in the beginning where everything is kind of like exciting. And then you start working with it. And then you start to realize how difficult it is when you have all of like the old school thinking, habitual thinking, all that stuff still with you. So far, one of my key learnings definitely is take it easy, take it slow, one step at a time, start small, and start by practicing where you are. So regardless of who you are and what your role is in the organization, start with your own work, start with your own peers, establish a circle, one circle for yourself, play with all the things. I mean, play with decision by consent, play with the difference between having a job description and having different roles, get it under your skin, and then slowly start expanding from there. And it's difficult because you get so passionate about it in the beginning that you just basically want to take it and run with it. But we say, you know, baby steps is much better.
Yeah, I find it interesting what you're saying about the enthusiasm is great, like falling in love with the system is great, and then you have the frustration if the structures don't change fast enough alongside with it, right? Like
Yeah.
how do you keep them in sync? Like how much can an organization change structurally, and how much can people's mindsets and skills change? If it's out of sync, it's just not gonna work well. And yeah.
No,
So
and we will be out of sync for so many years. I mean, because it's such a big organization and it's so heavily regulated, and a lot of the regulation doesn't come from the city council itself. It comes from like the government of Denmark, and there's so many laws and yeah, things that you have to comply with. And then it's a politically driven organization. There's a whole different dynamic in a city council than at a normal workplace, you could say. So if we promise people that we will change too fast, they get frustrated because it's not what they see. And because we do it the way we do it, where people can join voluntarily, their colleagues, you can say that they're not maybe their closest colleagues, but maybe some colleagues that they work with once in a while, they are still in the old system. And when they meet, they realize how far they have come working with the site, with the circles, but also how frustrating it is when you kind of like meet the old structure. And then they go like, how come it hasn't changed? Have we given up? Are you allowed not to join at all? You know, all those kind of questions, which are very understandable. So we're trying to manage expectations by saying we will be in this 1 foot here and 1 foot here. And for those who join now, we basically praise them for the courage they have in standing with 1 foot in each place. It will be like that for years ahead, I think.
hmm and being in that, yes, you're saying being in that transitional phase is harder than it will be when it's more uniform. So you kind of start with the harder situation of that mishmash, right?
Yeah. Also,
So
you
hold on.
talk. Sorry, yeah.
No, go ahead, please, Mette.
No, but also like you said talked about the structure and then the whole thinking and the behavior, and those are exactly the 3 parameters that we have that we focus on. So a lot of organizational change happens with someone sitting somewhere drawing a new organic org chart or something like that. And then everybody realizes that not much really changed. Or you talk about mindset and culture and you try to influence the organizational culture, but if you don't change anything else, nothing happens really at a deeper level. Or you can basically force people to change behavior by installing some new procedures or whatever. And what we're saying is, if we are ever going to be successful, we need to work with all of it. So we need to work with the structures of the organization. So if we don't have a hierarchy, how do we then, what is the structure then, for example, for financial control, which is like super important. The money we spend are tax money. We, you know, lots of respect, we need to have the finances under control. How do we structure decision making and so forth? And then the culture part. So what are the fundamental beliefs that we want to design our organization? And what I love about Sociocracy is that one of the fundamental beliefs is that people do want to collaborate. So if the task at hand is clear enough for the 2 of us or the 5 of us to share it, we all want to collaborate. We all want to do our best and to collaborate. To be quite honest, that's not the fundamental belief in the system that we're coming from. It's a fundamental belief that people will probably not do their best. That people will probably not look into the collaboration. They will think about themselves. Maybe, you know, take a day extra off if we don't have control mechanisms in place. So that needs to change. And that the behavior part. So the way that we conduct our meetings, the way that we make decisions, all of that stuff that is like also ingrained in Sociocracy. So what we do is that we start there Are you still with me? It seems like connection has. Okay, you are. You're listening.
I'm just very, very, very focused on listening.
Sorry. So what we have decided is, in order to change the structure, we need to have consent in a lot of places. In order to change the fundamental belief, we need time, a lot of time. But to change our everyday behavior, we can do that tomorrow. So we decided that where we will start is with the difference that we can all make. And that's why we have the approach that we have. We say, if you want to join, we will increase your capabilities. We will try to avoid that you feel incompetent in the journey. And we will invite you to go home and do something different tomorrow. And then we know that we will only be successful if we also change the structures and we also manage to change the culture in time. But it needs to be in that order, because otherwise it will simply take too long before we get going.
Great. That's awesome. Thank you. How much of the structure actually needs to change? Like how, like the org chart, how different will it look? What's your guess? How different will it be? Because there's only so many ways you can chunk elderly care and preschools and so on. Like it's not that you're going to do wild moves, I assume, but maybe tell me about that.
So, for example, actually, the short answer is I don't know. So I don't know. I don't know what it's going to look like, and that's what I also like about this process. It's very kind of like the solutions emerge as we go along. So, but I basically believe that the structures will change dramatically some years down the road. Again, here we take baby steps. So, for example, at the elderly home I was talking about before, what they have done is that instead of organizing them according to profession, they are now organizing it in the houses. They have like different houses where the elderly people live, and then they have pushed the full decision power to these houses and formed circles there. And they have appointed leads in those circles that had never had a formal leadership role before, and they are now coordinating and having decision making according to the Sociocratic principles there right now. So on paper, the structure looks the same, but in real life, the way they navigate the structure is different. So I think it will change a lot, but I think it will take a very long time before the structure on paper looks different. But it needs to change. There's another unit where they work with young people between 15 and 30 who have difficulties finding out what to do with their life. Maybe they can't hold on to school, maybe they can't hold on to a job, maybe they don't want to get any formal training. And what they have done there is, what they used to do is they work with, maybe somebody was a social advisor and all social advisors were organized together. Someone had a different profession and they work together. So now they have changed so that they're organized according to geography. So they have formed circles around all young people living in that area, so that everybody who would talk to that young person is now working much closer together than they were before. Sorry for the long answer, but it has to change, but I think it will take some time.
Sweet. How much does the population know about what's happening?
I think nothing. Very little. We haven't campaigned it at all. So, and we're only like, because of Corona, we got delayed a bit. So we're only like 1 year in. So the reports from the people working with it says that they are now at a stage where they feel they can master it so well that they can actually make decisions on the spot when they meet a citizen that has a certain need. So again, let's take the elderly care home that I referenced before. It's small things like if Mr. Smith finds that the weather is nice and he wants to go for a walk, nobody needs to ask for permission. The personnel working with him right there, right now, they can make the decision. They have also started allocating small sums of money to each of the circles so that they can make small decisions of, for example, taking 4 elderly people on a walk and buying an ice cream and going home again. So they don't need to, they can act on the spot. And the same thing goes for this unit working with the young people. So I think they feel it in terms of faster decision making, and people that are able to basically respond to their needs on the spot. But that's where we are right now. I'm trying to not. I'm actually holding back on campaigning it there. I'm making a lot of speeches in places where people like us that are interested in this meet, but we don't want to raise expectations around the citizens too fast, because it might lead to a pressure to the employees before they are actually ready. So we would like them to be comfortable with the methodology and the ways of working, and slowly master it, and then I think it will come all by itself.
Wow. In terms of training people and the whole learning and unlearning, how would you describe the biggest obstacles around having to unlearn, and the most, like, what do people feel most drawn to in terms of learning?
Tough questions, Ted. Let me start with the latter. I think that the simplicity, in a way, and they probably wouldn't argue with or agree with me during the first days, but after a while, I mean, the simplicity of the methodology, like the way that you conduct the meetings, the inclusiveness of making sure that everybody is heard, the influence that you are invited to have when you make the agenda at the meeting, when no one has a bigger say than others. I think those kind of things are quite appealing. You have to remember we are a society that really likes equity. And this kind of like appeals. I have to say also, I feel that the further out I get in the organization, the closer we get to the citizens, the more appeal it has. And I find that quite encouraging, actually. So if you're at the top of the pyramid, there are too many kind of control-related questions that are hard to answer. If you're really close to like the citizens or the core job, you can say, it seems that this methodology is more appealing. That's at least a hypothesis. And then to the unlearning, I think the whole idea of consensus and decision making in the old world is super hard for people to unlearn. The notion that I have to convince people about my whatever idea or my point of view, and the lack of training of working within the zone of tolerance instead of the zone of preference, that's a hard one. But it's also funny, because it's a lot of fun, because people start laughing about themselves, and when they see their lack of letting go of the whole idea of consensus.
And I don't want to put words in your mouth, so I'm going to check with you, because what I've come to, like, what I'm making of that when I see it is that people are just very attached, that people are attached to their opinions, because that's
exactly
what we've learned to be. And then it's about, oh no, hold on, this is not about my opinion, this is about what can we do here in terms of what needs to happen.
Exactly. That's exactly it. I think another thing that's really hard to unlearn in such a big, highly regulated organization, and also politically driven, is, and I don't think that's specific to this organization, but there's kind of like a fear that if a wrong decision is being made, that there will be some kind of scapegoatism, or you know, that someone needs to be thrown under the bus. So there's a lot of
Will
uncertainty. Huh?
and will there? That is a very, very relatable fear to me. What have you put anything in place? Like what happens if something gets screwed up? Like have you already addressed that, or how are you building safety nets for people so they can actually decide?
It's like it's kind of like this intangible leftover from years and years and years of history, in terms of having seen people being let go because of something, or having seen colleagues being called out in the local media, for example, or now having seen colleagues being called out on Facebook. So there's a lot of, like, because you are working with people's lives, basically, there's always a risk that if you make a mistake, that it will be publicly known. Whereas where I have worked before, if you make a mistake, nobody wants to make mistakes. But I haven't been confronted with the same level of, I would say, fear or uncertainty. So I'm not even sure if it's an unlearning thing, or it's reinstalling just a new confidence in the solidarity, I would actually say. So, but it is like this hesitating to take full responsibility when you get a role, and this, but isn't that the manager's job, basically? So when the decisions get difficult, they tend to travel upwards the organization. And when they do that, I mean, I get a lot of decisions landing on my table, especially in the beginning, and I don't have the context to make an intelligent decision. But that's what happens. And I think so we talk a lot about psychological safety and how to be a good colleague, and feeling comfortable in making the first step, and actually stepping in and taking that responsibility, and feeling safe at the same time. I feel like I'm making it sound a bit more black and white than it is, but it is a mechanism that we need to kind of like be aware of.
Mm-hmm. As we're nearing the end of our time here, I wonder if there's anything that we didn't come across now in our conversation that you would like to highlight. Is there something that didn't come up?
No, I guess I would like to say that we feel that we have just started, and that this is like a super ambitious agenda. To my knowledge, there's not another organization in Denmark that has the size of this organization, that has decided that it's the entire workplace that will embark on this journey. And yeah, so we have just started, and I think it's going to take a long time. So what we are saying is we will insist on progress. It has to be slow, and it has to be adapted to each of every area, but we will just, with a lot of care and a lot of attention, we will insist that we move forward slowly. But it's a huge undertaking.
I'm super inspired by the image that was coming to me while you were talking about elderly care and the responsiveness of decision making, just being able to serve people's needs, right? Because that's what it's about, right? That's what it's for. That's what the aim is, serving people's needs and being able to do that better. That's almost, yeah, that seems more than what could possibly wish for, and yet it's happening. That's amazing.
Thank you. And maybe I should also mention that others find it super interesting as well. And there's a university in Denmark, one of the big ones, that have kind of followed what we're doing with huge interest. And we started talking already last spring. And on May 1st, we will have a PhD student starting, that we have co-funded together with this university, and she will follow our journey for the next 3 years and do research on how does this impact the organization when you start working with these methodologies. And we will be very interested in seeing when and how will we meet some institutional barriers that need to change in order for us to progress. And yeah, so this is just like super exciting that we will have some research done in this area, and I can't wait for her to start.
Yeah, that sounds amazing. I also wonder, do you have already people from all over Denmark and probably all over the world, maybe, knocking on your door saying, "Ooh, my municipality is interested in that"?
I've been asked out a lot to make speeches and take part in panel discussions and so forth. What I find interesting, so Denmark is a very unionized country, and what I find interesting is that some of the unions that have a lot of employees in the public sector have actually been quite eager to also talk to me about what's going on. So I find that interesting because that just serves to illustrate that there's, from an employee point of view, huge interest in this as well. So, and like I said, I have never said no to an invitation to talk about sociocracy and what we're doing. So I hope the invitations will keep on coming.
And I hope you're going to be able to meet the demand somehow. Well, thank you so much. This is amazing. I'm so excited, and I see just this. I'm guessing we will hear about this a lot in the next few years because it's one of those big, really hope-inducing projects that. And I absolutely admire your courage in all of this. I mean, when I first heard about this, my first thought was knowing you, thinking like, that is, they're lucky. They're lucky because I don't think I know more than very few people. I don't even know if I know anybody besides you that I would say, oh yeah, sure. Give that to that person and it might even work out.
It might even, something might even happen. Thank you so much.
Amazing. So your courage, wow, wow, I'm in full admiration and I'm very, very happy that somehow you got connected with that position. Great.
And I'm very happy that that you were part of my own first personal steps into all of this. And we're waiting for this to be published in Danish
I
because
hear
the
it's almost
demand
done.
is huge and we are using it as our manual. So thank you so much for providing tons of inspiration and tools, and we use it.
Sweet. Well, thank you. And those at the conference, you're gonna go into Q&A.
Enjoy.
Bye.
Bye.